It was a Chicago landmark for half a century.
I don't think there ever was another place like the Edgewater Beach Hotel anywhere.
A lakeside resort right in the city.
You always saw wonderful orchestras, and you saw movie stars a lot.
There was glamour, great entertainment, and scandal.
Waitkiss went to the room, whereupon she fired at him.
The Edgewater Beach Hotel has been gone for more than 30 years, yet the memories linger.
You spelled Edgewater Beach Hotel M-A-G-I-C.
Magic by the Lake, the Edgewater Beach Hotel. Next on Chicago Stories. Good evening, I'm John Calloway, and welcome to Chicago Stories. When I first came to Chicago in the 1950s, I will never forget the first time I saw the Edgewater Beach Hotel. It was huge, it was grand, and it was pink. The Edgewater Beach was a lavish resort that stood right on the lakefront on Sheridan and Foster for almost half a century. You or someone you know probably had a wedding, prom, or just a fun night out on the town there. You may have seen a visiting president or run into a movie star. You might have read how an obsessed female fan shot a Major League Baseball player in her hotel room. Or you may be one of the thousands of couples who danced or took a romantic stroll on the famous beach walk. Chances are, if you ever visited the Edgewater Beach Hotel, you never forgot the magic by the lake.
From the beautiful Edgewater Beach Hotel on the shores of Lake Michigan, we bring you Orrin Tucker and the orchestra.
Our music comes to you this afternoon from the beach walk of the Edgewater Beach Hotel on the shores of Lake Michigan in Chicago.
In those days, people would get home from wherever they happened to be employed, get dressed in suits and formal gowns and go out for the evening. You had nightclubs all over the city of Chicago, not just downtown, but without question, none of them compared in grandeur to the Edgewater Beach Hotel with its fabulous marine room.
Most of our dates were at the Edgewater Beach. Our proms were there.
People came from all over the world, not necessarily to Chicago, but to the Edgewater Beach.
It was really the pride of Chicago.
In July of 1933, 18-year-old Ruth Seidel and her college sorority sisters took a bus from New York to Chicago to see the sights. Ruth's letter and postcards home told her parents of an experience of a lifetime.
Dear Momsy and Popsy, we certainly did have a grand time at the Edgewater Hotel, the most beautiful hotel existing. Swimming, tennis, luncheons. Last night, we had a dinner dance with our escorts at the Edgewater, and later, we danced outside on the open marble floor. A melodious orchestra playing on a stand especially constructed. The leader singing into a microphone. Tables and chairs all around like a Paris cafe. It was all grand. I'll never forget it.
Ruth Seidel's experiences turned out to be typical of the tens of thousands of guests who visited from out of town or just from across the street.
I thought it was an elegant place to visit. We lived right across the street from it, so we had ample opportunity.
It was a place of beauty and mystery, and all of the people in the neighborhood had great love for it.
Cooler by the lake, that could have been their motto for the Edgewater Beach Hotel.
The Edgewater Beach Hotel was the brainchild of Chicago businessman John T. Connery. He and his partner were looking for an investment. They tried to buy the Chicago Cubs, but the deal hit a last-minute snag. Years later, Connery's granddaughter, Mary Bidwell Nelson, recounted a family story about a meeting her grandfather, whom she called Papa, and his partner had with a Cubs representative named Charles Wilson.
They had $700,000 to invest. They traveled to St. Louis to make their offer to Mr. Wilson, who went into another office to make a phone call to Chicago to see if they were good for that amount of money. Whoever he spoke to told him to hold out for $1 million. He did not realize that Papa could overhear his conversation through an open transom. When he returned to his office, Papa stood and shook hands and said it was nice to meet him, and left.
Instead, Connery found his investment in his own backyard. He bought the vacant property across the street from his house on Sheridan Road.
They decided to build a hotel, and as it was all lakefront property, they named it the Edgewater Beach Hotel.
Connery called on a successful architectural firm, Marshall & Fox, that was beginning to leave a distinctive imprint on the landscape of Chicago. Marshall's ideas for the new hotel reflected his reputation for flamboyant taste and adventurous style. The construction would be in Spanish-style stucco in the form of a Maltese cross.
The unusual shape of the hotel, if you look at any picture of it, is one that gives people views of Lake Michigan.
The first building, with 400 rooms, opened in 1916 just north of Foster Avenue on the 5400 block of Sheridan Road. Mary Nelson, who grew up there, again remembers how her grandfather, owner John T. Connery, made sure the new hotel appeared, at least, to be an instant success.
When the hotel first opened in 1916, my grandfather was going from empty room to empty room in the evening, turning on the lights on the Sheridan Road side to make the hotel look occupied. That was not necessary for very long, as the hotel soon became very popular.
It was so popular, a second unit was built in 1922 just to the south. The hotel soon boasted 1,000 rooms. In keeping with the Edgewater's grand reputation, the passageway connecting the two buildings was known as the Passaggio.
It was classy rather than being really truly great architecture or style or anything else like that. I mean, it was pink.
It did have a pink cast. My recollection is that it came across more as white.
People may have debated the color of the hotel, but many Chicagoans would agree it was the place to be during the 1920s and 30s. There was something for everyone: a 9-hole golf course, a garden walk, a children's playground, a tennis court that was turned into an ice rink in the winter, music and gourmet meals in the marine dining room, and on summer nights, lavish floor shows and dancing and romancing on the 1,000-foot lakefront promenade known as the Beach Walk.
It was lovely because you just sat at a table and ordered your drinks and you danced. It was really delightful.
We danced on the pavilion outside, walked around in the grounds, which were very romantic, perfect for holding hands, and etc.
Another attraction was the chance to see a visiting celebrity.
Nat King Cole,
Perry Como,
Marilyn Monroe,
Betty Davis, Tallulah Bankhead.
I remember Tallulah Bankhead, when a plane went over, made a little noise, she looked up and said, "That's all right, darling, I'll wait."
It was a show place, and the man who operated it, William Dewey, was an entrepreneur. He was a showman, and he was good at booking top names to the Edgewater Beach, and it was very much part of its allure, from the very beginning to the very end.
William Dewey became the manager of the Edgewater Beach soon after it was built, and he later was named president. He was as much a fixture as the buildings themselves.
He loved green. The logo of the hotel is in green. His ties or his handkerchiefs would have the green monogram. He wrote with green ink.
Bill Dewey ran the tightest ship that I have ever seen.
And he was a very charming man. And he could persuade people by his charm, as well as being strict. If somebody had too much to drink or was acting in some way that he felt was inappropriate, he would just ask them to leave.
especially if guests did not comply with the hotel's strict dress code in its signature restaurant.
In those days, people dressed up. They didn't go around in jeans like they do today. And you could not go into the Marine Dining Room on a Saturday night unless you were in formal clothes.
The Marine Dining Room was the big draw in the 30s and 40s for Chicagoans who came to dine and then dance to the distinctive melodious sounds of the big bands, including Xavier Cugat, Tommy Dorsey, and Wayne King.
We'd have to wait and be quiet until the announcement was made. We're on the air.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Marine Dining Room. I guess everybody in our outfit is pretty happy tonight. The Bears won. When the Bears win, everybody in Chicago feels fine. We have a show that we sincerely hope that each one of you will find something in it that you like.
Remotes were being broadcast to various radio stations and various networks.
My funny Valentine, sweet comic Valentine, you make me smile with my heart.
Gloria Vann has been a big band singer since 1938.
I knew that I had reached my goal when I worked the Edgewater. I just felt like I was a big deal when I worked it. It was gorgeous.
Vann performed at the Edgewater Beach Hotel with the Wayne King Orchestra in the 1950s and on his NBC TV show.
In Sorrento there is sadness. Since you've gone there is no gladness.
Students came from the neighboring campuses to college night.
We danced to the best dance bands in the country. We got along handsomely with a very little bit of money. Many of us who were going to college and working our way through college were making 25 cents an hour. And you don't get to spend an awful lot of money on entertainment with that kind of a budget.
Chicago's Edgewater Beach Hotel houses this top studio of its time. Drapes hide microphones, glass walls shut out unwanted sound. Here are among the first motion pictures of broadcasting. Members of Chicago's Civic Opera sing the quartet from Rigoletto.
The Edgewater Beach Hotel did have its own radio station. In fact, it had two incarnations at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. In the very early 1920s, we had a radio station, WEBH, named for the Edgewater Beach Hotel.
It was also the home of a young comedy team, Charles Correll and Freeman Gosden. The white performers would go on to become famous and controversial, playing the black characters Amos and Andy.
They came to the Edgewater Beach Hotel, and what they had to offer was snappy patter and clever songs. And so the management of the radio station said, we'd love to put you on the air, but we can't afford to pay you. So for sandwiches, and maybe a little bit more than sandwiches, but not money, Freeman Gosden and Charles Correll went on the radio. They were on 6 nights a week.
Among the many residents who called the hotel home were a few Hollywood stars and several children.
Barbara Stanwyck and Robert Taylor gave me elocution lessons when I was 6. They lived across the hall.
Mary Lou McCarthy von Firstel grew up in the hotel.
From my point of view now, it's a very unusual childhood. At the time I was living it, I thought everybody did that. At that point, the hotel had elaborate floor shows, and I learned to ride a bike there, and I learned to roller skate in the daytime.
Every summer, they would have several children's parties out in the gardens, and they always had this wonderful clown by the name of Coco who entertained us.
They would always have production animal acts. They had the Dorothy Hill dancers who had themed productions. One of them was Arabian, so they had camels. In the wintertime, there was a performer named, the performer was Sharky, the seal, and I was allowed to feed him. The performers were my friends. Celebrities were always at the hotel.
The celebrities included famous sports figures. It was just a short ride to Wrigley Field for visiting teams. One of the greatest stories in baseball, Babe Ruth's called home run against the Cubs, is said to have originated when the Yankees arrived at the Edgewater Beach Hotel for their stay during the 1932 World Series. A Cubs fan spat at Ruth as he entered the hotel, but hit the Babe's wife instead. According to his autobiography, Ruth vowed that night in his hotel room to avenge the insult by hitting a home run the next day. He did, legend has it, after first pointing to the stands, his famous called shot. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was in the stands that day at Wrigley Field. He was one of several U.S. presidents to stay at the Edgewater Beach Hotel.
Eisenhower stayed there, and other presidents did. I mean, it was, it was a big deal for Chicago, just a big deal.
But the refined reputation of the Edgewater Beach was not immune to an occasional scandal.
Xavier Cugat, the very prominent band leader, and Abby Lane, the vocalist, were found in the same room. As a matter of fact, apparently in the same bed by Cugat's wife.
It was reported that Mrs. Cugat tore up the room in a fight with her husband, then divorced Cugat, who later married Abby Lane. The most notorious incident at the hotel took place in room 1297A in 1949. There, another Major League Baseball player, the Philadelphia Phillies' Eddie Waitkus, formerly of the Cubs, nearly met an untimely end. The Cubs had recently sent Waitkus to the Phillies in a controversial off-season trade.
On the afternoon of June 14, 1949, Ruth Ann Steinhagen, who was an obsessed fan who had fallen in love with Eddie during his tenure with the Cubs, announced to her friend that she was going to try to meet Waitkus at the hotel. She went to the hotel and sent a note up to Waitkus in his room.
The bizarre event would inspire a scene in The Natural, the novel by Bernard Malamud that became the film starring Robert Redford.
Waitkus went to the room, knocked on the door, and was admitted by Ruth Ann.
The door's open.
Whereupon she fired at him.
Waitkus was seriously injured, but survived his attack and made a comeback in baseball. After her trial, Ruth Ann Steinhagen was sent to a mental institution. The hotel survived the scandals and changes in the economy. It thrived on convention business, special events, and its reputation for excellent service. With dozens of banquet rooms and 6 restaurants, thousands of meals, quite pricey for the times, were served there each day. The hotel was the scene of countless weddings, including Mary Bidwell Nelson's. You'll recall she was the granddaughter of the man who started the Edgewater Beach, John T. Connery.
I lived with my grandfather on the 16th floor until I was married to John Lawrence Nelson in 1934.
The hotel offered a host of shops and did a thriving business promoting itself, selling souvenirs.
And they had the name of the Edgewater Beach on everything they could put it on.
The Edgewater Beach was almost a city within itself, with its own print shop, chocolate factory, and even a heliport. You could travel by air, land, or sea, depending on your destination.
They certainly boasted at one point in their history that they had a seaplane that you could, would take special guests back from downtown.
The motor coach was absolutely beautiful. It was painted a brilliant green.
It came, I don't know how many times a day. It had a schedule, and I think it cost like $1 for the trip from the Edgewater Beach to Marshall Fields.
And everyone knew it was the Edgewater Beach motor coach. You couldn't miss it.
One place you couldn't miss was the Yacht Club bar with its nautical theme and inspired decor.
Now, I wasn't old enough to go to the bar, but I could tell you when you walked in, couples used to love it because you walked on a sea ramp and you could hear the sound of the surf. I can tell you that the sound of the surf was made by a tray of pebbles rocking on it.
They had the walls that would go up and down, so it looked like, it gave the sense of being on a ship.
Some women were afraid to go down the gangplank because it really bounced. There was a bar, and there only men were allowed, no women at the bar.
I remember that women were not allowed to smoke, in public at the Edgewater Beach, and women were not allowed to wear slacks.
But by the 1960s, styles and customs were changing, especially among young people. The Edgewater Beach, like most traditional establishments, found itself at odds with the times.
Notions about refinement, gentility, elegance were thrown to the wind in the 1960s. So I think you have to say that it was just social forces colliding with an old age, a passé age, that really spelled the doom of these fabulous places.
As management, maintenance, and financial problems mounted for the hotel, the original owners sold their interest in the late 1940s.
My mother really did not want to sell the hotel, but I guess the handwriting was on the wall and times were changing and air travel came in and people were flying to different destinations for their vacation and holidays.
The elegant marine dining room with Dewey's signature green trim tableware was replaced by the Polynesian room. The employees, who were trained in serving fine cuisine, disdainfully referred to the new restaurant as that chop suey joint. By the early 1950s, Chicago was expanding. In 1953, the city filled in 60 acres of Lake Michigan for a much-needed extension of Lakeshore Drive to the north. The drive went directly past the Edgewater Beach, cutting it off from the lake and destroying the beloved beach walk. Hotel management spent $250,000 adding a swimming pool and cabanas, but the atmosphere was not the same, and the glorious hotel continued to decline.
The hotel literally got cut off from Lake Michigan, and it was lost now into the heart of the city and didn't have that lake breeze, didn't have that promenade along the lake because of extending Lakeshore Drive. And they still struggled to make it work for almost a decade.
About $500,000 signed autograph.
The Edgewater Beach could also no longer compete with the changing tastes in entertainment and new inventions that drastically changed lifestyles.
Once air conditioning came in, people no longer had the need to escape from their arid bungalows and stifling two flats just to get a breath of fresh air. They could now watch Milton Berle on television. So Milton Berle, TV, and air conditioning really killed the era of the Edgewater Beach and all of the hotels with their fabulous floor shows and fabulous dining rooms. That era just ended in the 1950s and early 1960s.
The hotel drew fewer and fewer guests. Facilities fell into disrepair. Financial losses mounted. On December 19, 1967, the hotel filed for bankruptcy. 2 days later, on December 21st, the owners abruptly shut down the Edgewater Beach Hotel.
They realized the enormous cost of maintaining this place, and they were losing too much money.
There were 300 employees, and all but a skeleton crew were told, at 5 o'clock this afternoon, you're through. All the residents, there are 65 permanent residents, were told they'd have to move.
The employees and occupants were in shock. Residents, many of whom made the hotel their home for decades, were told to move by the end of the day. For the employees who were expecting their Christmas bonuses, there were no last paychecks, and there were no pensions.
It was very sad when they closed the hotel. It was just 4 days before Christmas. They had some permanent residents there. They were sitting out on the street in the middle of nowhere. The employees didn't have any money and nowhere to go.
It folded because it was mismanaged. They began to change it and cheapen it.
If you were in it at that time, as I was, you saw cracks in the walls, you saw, just routine repair work that needed to be done and wasn't. So they tore it down.
The hotel itself did not go out without a fight. It took more than a year to tear down the two reinforced steel buildings.
The whole neighborhood full of dust because they were taking it down with a wrecking ball. And so it went on for over a year. They couldn't get the building down because it was built that well. It was a big part of this neighborhood. So we were awfully mad when they were going to take it down.
It was an incredible building and really held a lot of memories for people. It was part of a fantasy.
There's never been one like it, and there probably never will be another like it. It was the most beautiful hotel I've ever seen.
One man told me he went fishing with his dad at Montrose Harbor and he could hear the music coming across the water. And he held that memory because it was just so wonderful and so different than the rest of his life. You know, go to that lake shore and somehow you were somewhere else.
The elegance still remains in the decor of the Edgewater Beach apartments, built in 1927. It is the last of the original structures left on the property. Condominiums now sit on the hotel site, together with a building for seniors that features a display of mementos from the hotel. As you walk by, you can almost hear the big bands playing, just as they did in the glory days of the Edgewater Beach Hotel. For Chicago Stories, I'm John Calloway. Thank you and good night.